Can you imagine, here on these roads, what they have been through? We follow in their footsteps. We cross the same woods, climb the same hills, march the same path. Imagine how they felt. The Liberation winded its way from the shores of southern England to the beaches of Normandy, from the forests of the Ardennes to the bridges of the Rhine, until the war in Europe came to a timely end in Berlin on May 8th, seeming at times far from certain. It is important to overcome our histories of past division while never forgetting the story of these places. Every memorial, building, cemetery, nature reserve, or museum speaks to us in a different way. We can visit them. We can learn from them to do better in our own future. Now it's your turn. Explore and hike the Liberation Route Europe. Walk in the shoes of the Allied forces and discover the history that unites us together. Follow in the footsteps of history. Visit liberationroute.com.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon to all our viewers online across the world. Welcome to the Allied Museum here in Berlin. This is a very special day. I would like first to introduce to you the Managing Director of the Ellery Foundation, Remy Pro. Remy, today is a very special day for the Ellery Foundation, the launch of our International Hiking Trails Network. How do you feel about it?
Good afternoon, Jurjan. Well, thank you very much for the welcome words, and thank you all for being with us online and offline here with us. I feel very grateful that we can have this event today because it's in a time of a pandemic, to be together physically and virtually is amazing, and we have the chance and the occasion, the opportunity to present our project, and I hope that this will inspire a lot of people to travel through Europe to discover the heritage of the Second World War.
Yeah, thank you. We're going to hear more about it. But before we go there, I would like to pay tribute and deliver a very warm welcome to our very VIP guests from the United States of America, our Second World War veterans, the gentlemen present here. It's so fantastic. You've made the way across the Atlantic, back in Berlin, after all those years, because all of you have been in Germany in 1945 and are revisiting Germany in 2021. It's fantastic to have you as our guests, and I hope that the program will be appreciated by you, because you can also regard it as a tribute to everything and all the efforts you've made. So, having said all this, as said before, in the Allied Museum here in Berlin, we've planned our live event today, live and hybrid and online, well, a typical COVID-19 event, I would say, to mark the launch of our Hiking Trails Network, Liberation Europe Trails Network, from London to Berlin. And that means that this afternoon, we're going to take you on a virtual journey from London via various countries on the way, and then finally ending in Berlin. And that means that you will hear some key partners and corporations and people we work with, and because without their help, we would not have been able to realize this project. And by the way, my name is Jurjan de Mol, Ellery Foundation, and I will be your host this afternoon and hosting you through the program in cooperation with Remy. So, very special also for us, not only the launch of our Trails Network in Europe, but also the cooperation with the German government. And so we're very happy that we've got our cooperation since 2020. And one of the people that have been very helpful to organize this for us is our patron, Mr. Martin Schulz. So I think it's a good idea to hear a few words, his speech to you this afternoon. So maybe we can have a look at that.
Dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, as patron of the Liberation Route Europe Foundation, it is an exceptional pleasure for me to welcome you all for the opening ceremony of the hiking trail, contributing to commemorate the liberation from the Nazi dictatorship in Europe, to keep the memory of the enormous sacrifices, especially soldiers of the Allied armies, but also the civilian population in several countries, especially in France, in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in Luxembourg, and also in Germany. The enormous suffer of people in the end of the Second World War. To commemorate all these events is a duty, especially of my generation, the first one in Europe, born, and I hope until the death, living in freedom, democracy, and in a kind of liberty no generation in before has known. That it is possible to organize the hiking trail for the Liberation Route Foundation is also the result of an exceptional support of the German Foreign Ministry, and for this support I'm exceptionally grateful. To all of you, my best wishes, and I hope that our project will have the success we need to keep the memory.
Thank you, Martin Schulz, for your kind words and for your effort, all your efforts and the support in cooperation with the German government you've provided to the Ellery Foundation. So, Remy, we're going to talk a little bit more, give a little bit more of insight of our organization. So my first question to you is about the Ellery Foundation. What are the activities the foundation is actually undertaking?
The Ellery Foundation was created about 10 years ago. And from day one, its aim was to preserve and share the history of the Second World War and to carry a message regarding our peace, reconciliation, and freedom. We have many projects, and today we are presenting one. And all those projects have in common that we want to share the different perspectives of this history. This is not about Westerners versus the Soviet. It's not about the soldiers' experience versus the civilians' experience. It's not about rewriting a European history of the war. It's to combine all those perspectives and to show the complexity of the war and its memory. And in all our projects, whether it's remembrance tourism, whether it's research or exhibition or education projects, everything falls into that aim, memory transmission.
And so exactly as you were saying, one of the major projects of the Ellery Foundation is the Liberation Route Europe Hiking Trails Network. So could you give us some more insights on this?
Well, the Liberation Route Europe project started, and you know it very well, 12 years ago, 13 years ago. And the idea was to connect regions, sites, stories, and people who were involved in this memory transmission. And this route across Europe grew and to become a truly international trail. We were certified by the Council of Europe as a cultural route, which was very important. It was 2 years ago. But we missed a very tangible aspect. And we wanted to really connect those sites and to follow with your feet, maybe later with your bicycle, to follow this liberation route to discover the history.
Follow in the footsteps of history to start with.
Indeed.
Indeed. Thank you, Remy. Well, that brings me to one of our strategic members and partners, a member of the Ellery Foundation from the very beginning, the very first hour, and that was, and still is, the Allied Museum here in Berlin. And therefore, without partners like, for instance, this Allied Museum in Berlin, it's not possible to realize a project like this. So therefore, we are very grateful to be here and also to have the managing director of the Allied Museum here, Dr. Jürgen Lilteiche. Please, I invite you to share a few thoughts with us.
Thank you, Jurian.
Thank you.
A cordial welcome to you all and also to the public on the internet. The Allied Museum Berlin, which is situated, as we say, in the little America of southwest Berlin. That's where the American troops were stationed right after 1945. And together with the French and British troops, they were, as they considered themselves, the outpost of freedom for West Berlin. And as we are here in the Outpost Theater, this name was given by the American troops to this cinema, is sort of, this name shows how they considered themselves. So indeed, we are a long-term member of the Liberation Route because we really think, and that's our DNA, I would say, that we should pay tribute and we should be grateful. We should remember the success of the anti-Hitler coalition, and we should should remember what the Americans or the Western troops brought back to Germany, I would say, democracy and freedom. They enabled us to come back to our democratic traditions, which were there, but which were heavily destroyed by the Nazis. So it should be remembered what the veterans, what you veterans have done for Germany, and so many American and British soldiers for our country. And we also feel a deep gratitude for all the American troops who did their duty right after 1945, who sort of served their time here in West Berlin, and there were thousands of them. So what I would say is, what we try to transmit here in this museum is, of course, the history of democracy, but also that democracy and our values have to be defended each day, each hour, each second, and you have to be really committed in this term, what we learn out of the history, also to use violence. It is sometimes very much underestimated. So I'm very glad to have you veterans here, and again, thanks for your service.
Thank you, Jürgen Liltacher. Thank you. So that brings us to the next part of our program. And so we're going to talk about meaningful and sustainable tourism, because those two topics are combined in the Liberation Route Europe hiking trails. And that means that when we started the project back in 2008, 2008. We already had a dream at the time when it started as a regional project in the Netherlands, in the region of Arnhem and Nijmegen, Battle of Arnhem, Operation Market Garden. So we knew when we were trying to build the Liberation Route in a way we thought that it would be accessible for a greater public. Already then we knew it belongs to a far bigger story, it belongs to a far bigger trail. And finally, indeed, we ended up in Normandy and in Berlin and in southern England and in the Hürtgen forest. So the dream at the time was to create a second Camino de Santiago de Compostela. Well, this is the July 22nd, 2021, and we're getting there because we're launching our Camino this afternoon together with you. So it's quite a project, and I would like to ask Remy, what is the impact? When you think of the project we are undertaking in Europe, what is the impact of it?
As you said, we were talking about remembrance tourism, which is a very special type of tourism. It's not like any other, and that makes it a very meaningful one. So when people go on the route, when you go with veterans, when you go with your kids, then you are talking about something very important. You are carrying a message, or messages, about peace, about reconciliation, I said it before, about freedom, about democracy. And when you enjoy, for example, Berlin, there is also a very deep reflection behind it. So this is what we call meaningful tourism. And next to it also you have a sustainable tourism approach, because we are talking about hiking trails. We are talking about cycling trails, and we hope that this will stay for a long time and also make sure that we preserve the future. So I see a very strong connection between preserving peace but also preserving the world we live in with this sustainable approach. The second part of the impact it has on Europe is that it's truly a cooperation between European organizations and Europeans, as well as with Americans, Canadians, and other allies. And this is a very symbolic and very powerful cooperation, because we are all together in this project, and we hold our hands and to go in the same direction, and we're working towards the same ambition and the same mission. So that has a very powerful impact, I think.
Listening to what you've said, I think we've created or are creating the largest World War II memorial here in Europe, and that's also a testament to the generation that fought and that died, and luckily, look at our guest here, survived that very difficult period in time in modern history, the Second World War. So, having said this, I think I would like to introduce to you someone very special to us as well, because that is Mr. Andreas Görken. He is the Director General of Culture for the German Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in Berlin. And that's the ministry that is supporting the Liberation Route project, the hiking trails project, since 2020 financially, and we're very, very grateful for that. So I would like to ask him to join us here on stage. And I've prepared a few questions for you, Mr. Görken.
Hi.
Good
Thank you.
afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. And first of all, let me say to which extent I'm humbled to be here in front of 6 veterans who came for the liberation to Germany and are coming back today. So it's also to pay tribute to you, to your efforts, and to say thank you.
Thank you. So, well, the first question is, why is it important for Germany to support this project of Liberation of Europe hiking trails?
How could it not be of importance for Germany? So let me stress that it's not only us as Ministry of Foreign Affairs supporting the project, but it's a grant given by the German Parliament.
Yeah.
And Martin Schulz and some other members of Parliament had been instrumental to that. And as an administration, it's an honor for us to execute the will expressed by a Parliament. And it's a cultural project. So I'm Director General for Culture and Communications. 2 years ago, we started a broad communication campaign in the US called Wunderbar Together. It was in a very tricky moment of the bilateral relationship. And culture is, as we have learned from important academics, culture is the non-individual memory of a society. So honoring the memory is a cultural task. And we just try to fulfill the task which is given to us.
Thank you. A very nice insight. My second question, what do you hope that people that are going to hike the trails on their way, that they will learn or will experience? What do you think? What do you want?
That's a wonderful point in your project, because it's so deeply grounded in a European culture. Mm-hmm. You mentioned Santiago de Compostela. You can also mention all the big hiking routes through Europe. And it's by walking that we make our experience. It's the closest to our natural movements. And it's closest to our senses. So by going that path of the liberation, I'm sure quite everybody will experience something. He will experience something very special, very European, and very closely linked to the Allied forces, coming from the West and coming from the East. We should not forget the contribution of the Soviet forces in the Second World War. And that will give us, they will experience another Europe than the Europe we are promoting when we say that we defend values. We do not only have to defend values. We need to do what you did. You offered values after Second World War. There wouldn't be any reconstruction in Europe of democracy, of a healthy economy, without the efforts done by the United States and by the Allies. And we have to offer something today to the world. We don't have only to defend our values. Mm-hmm. We have to offer them and make ourselves attractive for others.
Yes, well, I just told you just before we met, when we met, we are already talking also with the Russian Federation, for instance, but today we stick to our hiking trails at the moment, but it's definitely in the near future to develop in that way. So the third question would be, message from you to the future travelers on the liberation route in Europe.
Go for it. That's a very short message. Just go for it.
Go for it. Put on your shoes and start walking.
Put on your shoes, experience yourself, experience the wonderful landscapes you're walking in, and feel the efforts done to keep those landscapes in a sustainable, peaceful way, and then go back home and contribute. Contribute to freedom, contribute to peace, and contribute to what will be the grand task of the 21st century, diversity and sustainability.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your kind words. Mr. Gürken, thank you. From Mr. Andreas Gürken, I would like to proceed to another very important person, to our project instrumental person, an iconic well, what he created made our project iconic. I should rephrase it. So I'm talking about Daniel Liebeskind and Remy. And I think I was right. You were having this lunch this week with Daniel and Nina Liebeskind. So how are they doing?
They're doing very good, and
Fine.
now living in Berlin. You're right, Jurjan. It was a very decisive meeting a few years ago with Daniel and Nina Liebeskind, because when we were in this project a few years ago, we knew that we wanted to make this tangible. We knew we wanted people to actually experience physically this travel through Europe to understand what happened. But we also knew the challenge that we had to find something that would be recognizable in the landscape, that people could follow. And then we met with Daniel Liebeskind. He's an architect from the US, but was born and lived a long time in Poland. And he's done a lot of work regarding remembrance. He built many museums, for example, the Jewish Museum here in Berlin. He built memorials, for example, in Amsterdam or in Ottawa about the Holocaust. So he has a very personal mission regarding this history. And when we met, we said, we have a problem, we have a challenge. Can you help us? And he did, and he came up with a family of markers, a concept which he called the vectors of memory. And indeed, this week, I met with him and we had a conversation which we recorded.
Okay.
I was struck by the idea of, marking a place. What does it mean, marking a place? But also showing a direction. And I immediately sort of drew the kind of spiral that really is centering sort of a plus sign that you are there, you've arrived. But also a direction in space along that route that could inform you also in space and in time where on this route you are. And so I immediately had this sense of a vector, which is a pointer, like in a compass, or like something in your mind that points to the importance of where you are. I designed them as a family of vectors which can be related to a particular story which is being told. And I think people who will walk around or explore that route will see the variety in their own minds, forming a trail of information and of emotions as they discover where they are. Well, the 3.5 meter monument is a dramatic, it's really a pointer, a vector, but it's also a sculpture. It has its presence in the place in which it is located, because it's speaking about something very important. It's not about itself. It's really pointing to those bunkers. It's pointing in that landscape, which might be very idyllic, to something dramatic, and where lives were lost, where people fought bloody battles. I mean, the smaller vector, which is really almost like a plaque, metallic plaque, which is attached, it also has an important presence. It might be on a building or on a really anonymous place that is not really featured, but suddenly make that place come to light. Well, this one is like almost like a pebble you notice on the ground. Just because it's smaller, it's not any less important or less effective. It's just that it plays a different role. And I think stumbling upon or finding or discovering this on the ground might have a very big sort of value for the person who discovers it and bends over to see what it represents. So again, there is almost a ritual in discovery of these objects. They are not just one and the same and just a formula. Each one has its own set of gestures associated. Each one has its different scale, different human emotion, and a variety that I think is necessary to communicate what history is. First of all, I want to salute the liberators. I mean, that's something very touching, that there are still people who not only remember, but who sacrifice their lives, put them at risk of death to liberate others. That's not something to be taken for granted. And of course, the statement, the message of liberation is to thank people who are involved also in creating that history, that topography of memory that can bring us to the future. So to me, the markers, the whole idea of Liberation Route is not about the past. It speaks about the past, but it's a road to the future. And in that sense, I admire everybody who has been involved, who made it possible, who funded it, who worked on it, and who will be the recipients of this.
So that was a very nice insight from Daniel Liebeskind, and obviously because of his work and his help with the development of the vectors of memory, as he explained, our hiking trails, Liberation Route hiking trail, is indeed becoming a monument lasting for a long time in the landscape as well in Europe. So to achieve all this and to complete the development of our hiking trails, I would like to ask you, Remy, I mean, we've been working with quite some organizations, but for instance, with the hiking organizations, can you elaborate on this?
Absolutely. This project is not just our foundation, of course. We have to work with partners like museums here, the Allied Museum, historians, but also with hiking associations. They are the ones who know which trails we can take, which ones are maintained, which ones are safe. So we have signed partnerships with 4 of them already, the European Ramblers Association, the Dutch, the Belgian, and the French associations, and more partnerships will come up in the future. And the work with them is to look at all the trails network that exists. We reuse those and we connect it to the historical sites and the stories. And this together forms the Liberation Route Europe hiking trails. So those partnerships are instrumental to the success of the project.
Let's have a look at what they are explaining to us in a short video.
Hello, my name is Joep Naber. I am a member of the European Ramblers Association, of the Presidium of the European Ramblers Association. The association is more than 50 years old, and at the moment we have an umbrella organization of 65 different members throughout Europe, which represent more than 35 different countries in Europe. So not only the European Union, but the whole of Europe. And you know them because they facilitate the local, the regional, and the national trails in your country. So as a European Ramblers Association, we organize European trails based on these national trails. So 12 different trails through Europe. And that could be the basis of also the Liberation Route Europe. We do this because we think that the work of the Liberation Route Europe is a very valuable work, because it will be walking in a European culture and a European history. And the European history is based in the last 75 years on freedom. And we walk in freedom and we live in freedom. And we hope that for the next 75 years, Liberation Route Europe will create a network of freedom through walking, which is the most precious thing in Europe. And we want to congratulate you to create this network with the support of our European Ramblers Association.
My name is Ankie van Dijk. I'm the managing director of Wandelnet, the Dutch hiking organization. We joined the Liberation Route Europe because we believe in the power of walking, and especially the hiking trails with lots of experience during the trail. In the Netherlands, we have more than 10,000 kilometers of hiking trails, and we do like to work together internationally. Our motivation for walking is that it's just fun, but also the experience of realizing what happened where you walk. And walking is not just moving on, but it's also standing still. And especially with this theme, we believe the power of the Remembrance Trail of the Liberation Route in Europe. I wish you a lot of footsteps, especially in the Netherlands, on this special route, but also standing still at these specific moments to believe and experience the Liberation Route of Europe.
Je me présente, Jean-Claude Marie, vice-président de la Fédération française de randonnée, élu depuis novembre 2020 au sein d'une nouvelle équipe porteuse d'un développement touristique des territoires par la randonnée pédestre en s'associant à tous les acteurs, collectivités ou autres. Nous connaissons également en parallèle une transformation notable du tourisme, des modes de consommation du voyage, du sport, de la culture et des loisirs, notre fédération doit s'adapter, voire se réinventer. C'est pourquoi nous sommes ravis de l'alliance que nous sommes en train de mettre en place avec la Fondation LRE, qui a initié un projet majeur de développement d'un tourisme mémoriel en créant un réseau de sentiers sur la route de la libération de l'Europe, basé sur la mise en valeur touristique des territoires et avec une thématique forte d'histoire douloureuse qu'il est important de porter à la connaissance de nos jeunes générations. Nous tenons à saluer l'originalité de cette démarche qui s'appuie en France sur des sentiers de randonnée qualifiés FF Randonnée et qui permettront de découvrir des lieux de mémoire en utilisant notamment les sentiers de grande randonnée. Ce projet, qui a été présenté récemment dans un webinaire à l'ensemble de notre réseau fédéral, a été accueilli avec enthousiasme par nos quelques 100 comités départementaux. Si aujourd'hui, Internet fait partie de notre quotidien, il le change profondément. Les acteurs de l'économie collaborative l'ont bien compris et créé de nouveaux codes. Gageons que notre collaboration deviendra exemplaire par son dynamisme et permettra de redécouvrir autrement à la fois notre géographie et notre histoire de France, mais aussi en Europe.
So there were encouraging words from the hiking associations in Europe, some of them. We're very proud to have these cooperationships all over Europe with these organizations. And honestly, in order to open up the trail and to make it accessible for a greater public, greater audience internationally, a lot of work has been done by the team of the Ellery Foundation. Remy, have you got a few examples what you've been up to with the team in the last 12 months, I would say?
One of the very important aspects, apart from the historical content and the definition of the trails, was the creation of a new digital platform and portal. We designed it in the idea that there should be a route planner. So anyone interested in history would say, I would like to go to Normandy, to the Belgian Ardennes, to Berlin, and I would like to follow a trail. How can I do that? What kind of sites can I visit? What kind of stories can I read about or listen about? And so we worked very hard in the past month to be able today to present a new website, a web application, which will be in the coming month also adapted to a mobile application. So everyone will have this kind of companion, I would say, on its hike across Europe and to know where to go.
So you're talking about a travel companion in a way, which is, I think, a very good description of it. And that brings me to part 3 of our program this afternoon, dear guests, a virtual journey along the Liberation Route. So that means that we would like to introduce a few of our key partners, key regions throughout Europe along the trail to Berlin, and therefore we're going to visit a few places. We're going to embark together on that journey. And Remy, what's the first region we go to?
Well, maybe Jorian, before we go to the first region, maybe our audience would like to see what the website looks like. We have made a small
of course,
video.
You brought it with you. Yeah,
we have made a small video that will present this this portal, and then we can go and a little bit of a preview. It will be in the UK, but first we start with this video about a new website.
Indeed, a travel companion, as you could see, and I was already so enthusiastically carried away to go on this virtual trip along the Liberation Route. To this, just one line to this travel companion, yes, for people walking, and you've got all the information, entertainment, infotainment, practical tips. And I learned that not only the hikers, Remy, but also the tour operators and the press people, everyone said, look, it's so easy accessible, it's such a treasure of information, I mean, related to the topic. This app will be one of the world's favorites, I think. Having said all this, let's embark on the virtual trip along the trail. And so, our first key region, where do you take us?
Well, indeed, as I said, today we're presenting this first phase of the hiking trails from London to Berlin via France, Belgium, the Netherlands. So the starting point is obviously the UK. And we have a very close partnership with one specific region, the south part of England around Portsmouth, where thousands and thousands of soldiers embarked to go to invade and liberate Europe. So this is the first region we start with.
I love living in London. The streets, the people, the culture, every part of the city vibrates. This is one of the places where you can feel the history the most, the Churchill War Rooms. In these rooms, the British government organized many important strategic meetings during the war. Think about the impact they had. Right here, decisions were made that would shape the future of not just Europe, but the world. I followed the Liberation Route Europe from London to Portsmouth. Portsmouth is filled with stories about the preparation for Operation Overlord, or D-Day. In these woods, Allied troops camped and prepared before heading off to embark for Normandy. Close by is the historic Southwark House. It was here the plans for D-Day were finalized. Or the Golden Lion Pub, where Generals Eisenhower and Montgomery sat down for one last drink. Actions made here at these remarkable places influenced the history of the war. The moment you see the English Channel, your mind drifts to the soldiers and how they felt at this very spot. Allies from across the world stood here waiting, with one last push to cross the Channel and to storm the beaches of Normandy. What was going on inside these young soldiers' heads? It makes you think.
Yes, southern England, the Portsmouth region, beautiful landscape, inspiring landscape, but also a lot of stories to be told, lots of sites to be seen, and I think therefore it's a good idea to invite the curator of the D-Day story in Portsmouth, Mr. Andrew Whitmarsh, to share a few words with us here this afternoon.
I'm Andrew Whitmarsh and I'm the curator of the D-Day story, which you can see behind me here in Portsmouth. And the museum has been in existence since 1984. And in 2018, we underwent a major redevelopment and we were shortlisted for the European Museum of the Year as a result. D-Day stories here in Portsmouth because this whole area played such a big part in the preparations to D-Day and in launching D-Day. Not just Portsmouth, but the whole surrounding area as well. So within Portsmouth, as well as our museum, there's some traces locally, for example, places where the Mulberry Harbours were built. There's some camps where the troops were based before they embarked to go over to Normandy, and there's other military museums and other attractions to see as well. Where we are on the seafront in Portsmouth looked very different in May 1944, just before D-Day. The whole seafront was all cordoned off to civilians because of the various D-Day related activities happening here, including just along the seafront from us that way, South Parade Pier, which was used for embarking troops. There were other places locally, for example in Gosport, which is just the other side of Portsmouth Harbour, just to the west, that was used for lots of troop embarkation as well. Visiting the D-Day story in Portsmouth gives you a great overview of D-Day, of the whole Normandy campaign, both the preparations that would have happened before D-Day and also what happened on D-Day and afterwards. So inside the museum there's extensive displays with historic artefacts, films, interactives, a whole range of different means of interpretation to help visitors understand the whole subject. And then of course what you can see behind me, LCT 7074, a real landing craft tank that took part in the operation that was there on D-Day and now part displays at our museum, so visitors can come and see it and actually understand and walk around the whole landing craft, understand what it was like being part of the crews of these landing craft or being transported over to Normandy in one of these landing craft in 1944.
The story of D-Day and the Normandy campaign definitely involves both sides of the English Channel, so I think it's really good to start on the English side and the British side, and the D-Day story in Portsmouth is an excellent start to that, to your visit. Then travel over to Normandy and experience everything that there is to see there, or indeed, of course, if you're on the continent, come back across the Channel and come and learn more about what happened before D-Day happened on the British side.
Well, Jurjen, we are very grateful for the support of Andrew in Portsmouth and the support of the D-Day Museum, the D-Day story. But also, we're working with many other UK partners, and we have set up a few months ago a branch organization in the UK, and we will work with more and more institutions, involve more sites and stories to expand the Liberation Route Europe in the coming years.
Yeah, luckily, we're all looking forward to that. And well, having explained what's going on for the Liberation Route in the United Kingdom, I think we now do as the Allies did in June 1944, and that means leaving southern England, cross the English Channel, and go to Normandy, a region so marked by liberation that it doesn't need no introduction.
En Europe, l'histoire est partout. Près de chez soi, ou à des milliers de kilomètres. La route de la libération de l'Europe se fraye un chemin sur les plages de Normandie. C'est là qu'a eu lieu le débarquement en 1944. En tant que professeur d'histoire, la Deuxième Guerre mondiale nous fascine toute notre vie. Nous connaissons les récits de l'époque mieux que quiconque. Mais une fois sur les lieux, ces récits prennent vie. À première vue, tout semble paisible. Mais en y regardant de plus près, les stigmates de la guerre apparaissent plus clairement. Chaque grain de sable de cette plage semble avoir une histoire à raconter. On ressent aussi l'histoire à proximité de la plage. Omaha Beach National Guard Monument, le cimetière américain en Normandie, le Pegasus Bridge. Ce sont ces monuments qui donnent une place aux événements du passé. En les visitant, les récits se transmettent à nouveau pour que nous n'oublions jamais. L'étonnement est le même à chaque fois que nous visitons cet endroit. Si près de chez soi et en même temps, un monde complètement différent.
So the Normandy region has been a very important partner for us, as being also one of the founders of this project many years ago. And we have a friend, Dominique Saucé. She works for the Regional Tourist Board of Normandy, and she wanted to address a few words to us today.
Bonjour, je suis Dominique Saucé, je travaille pour Normandie Tourisme, donc je fais la promotion de la Normandie. Je suis responsable de l'univers découverte pour la Normandie, c'est-à-dire que cela comprend toute la partie histoire, la culture, le patrimoine et le savoir-faire. Et donc la destination tourisme de mémoire a toute sa place dans mon travail, et donc je suis en charge de la promotion de cette destination. Notre partenariat avec la LRU, la route de la libération. Il faut savoir que depuis le départ, la région Normandie est partenaire, cofondateur de cette organisation culturelle et touristique, car nous avions les mêmes missions, c'est-à-dire que nous avons les mêmes attentes, les mêmes valeurs, et nous avons une envie de travailler avec une vision européenne sur cette destination tourisme de mémoire. Ce partenariat touristique culturel aussi met en évidence cette thématique et a une continuité à l'échelle européenne. Et ça, c'est très intéressant parce que ça nous permet, via ces sites de randonnée, ces sentiers de randonnée, que nous pouvons faire à pied ou à vélo, de venir découvrir les sites de mémoire en Normandie, avec un angle en plus de développement durable, de tourisme responsable, et surtout, cela permet aussi pour les visiteurs, randonneurs, touristes, de découvrir des sites par un chemin de traverse, car ce sont des sentiers qu'ils n'auraient pas pris s'ils étaient venus en voiture. Donc cela permet aussi d'avoir un autre angle de vue, une autre perspective sur des sites de mémoire qui sont des sites majeurs sur cette thématique en Normandie. Ce qui est intéressant aussi, et ce qui est à noter sur ces sentiers de randonnée, c'est qu'en fait il y a une continuité et une logique et un circuit qui se crée petit à petit. C'est-à-dire qu'on vient en Normandie découvrir les sites de mémoire qui racontent l'histoire du débarquement, l'histoire de la bataille de Normandie, durant l'été 1944, mais ensuite, on découvre au fur et à mesure de nos randonnées, d'autres sites en dehors de la Normandie qui racontent la suite ou qui peuvent raconter aussi des événements durant l'occupation. Voilà, donc je vous invite tous à venir en Normandie pour visiter ces sites de mémoire qui sont, je le rappelle, majeurs pour comprendre et découvrir l'histoire. Et surtout, vous serez toujours les bienvenus. Merci.
So yes, Jurian, Normandy is indeed important, but in France we also work with many other regions, like in Alsace or in Provence, to talk about this landing of August 1944 in Paris, in northern France. So it's a long journey, it's a big country, but we have many other supporters in this region, and the Normandy region is the spokesperson, I would say, of those partners over there.
Well, very warm and kind words from Dominique, from Normandy. And indeed, as you say, France is a big country, but in 1944, from Normandy, the Allied forces quickly advanced to Paris and then to Belgium and Luxembourg, where the front stayed fixed in December 1944 in the Belgian Ardennes, Belgian and Luxembourg Ardennes. Temperatures minus 20, 25 degrees, lots of snow. Last week we were there, it was sunny. We couldn't imagine the conditions for the troops over there. Anyway, with the Allied forces being there in those Belgian and Luxembourg Ardennes, the German army organized a major counter-attack because they hoped to recapture the port of Antwerp in Belgium. And that was a fierce battle which later became known as the Battle of the Bulge.
En Europe, l'histoire est partout, près ou loin de chez nous. Il y a tant à découvrir et à apprendre tout en se ressourçant lors d'une randonnée. La route de la libération de l'Europe traverse notamment les Ardennes belges et luxembourgeoises. La bataille des Ardennes s'est déroulée dans ces bois et plaines, juste ici, sous nos pieds. Les itinéraires vous emmènent sur les traces des troupes alliées qui ont libéré l'Europe en 1944 et 1945. Dans les Ardennes, des sites tels que le mémorial du Mardasson, le Bastogne War Museum et le cimetière allemand de Recogne vous permettent de mieux comprendre ce qu'elles ont vécu. Leur histoire, votre histoire, notre histoire. Un des épisodes les plus marquants de cette bataille s'est déroulé dans le Bois Jacques, une petite forêt près de Foix. Les troupes américaines y ont été stationnées pendant l'hiver 1944 et 1945, sans nourriture, sans vêtements chauds, loin de leur famille. Vous pouvez toujours y voir comment les événements passés ont remodelé le paysage. Même s'il est difficile de se faire une idée d'une telle époque, marcher le long de la route de la libération de l'Europe, c'est marcher dans les pas de l'histoire.
Jurian, in the Ardennes, we have a very strong friend as well. As you said, we were there last week. He's the director of the Bastogne War Museum. His name is Mathieu Billard, and he wanted to address a few words to us today.
Je m'appelle m'appelle Mathieu Billa, je suis le responsable du Bastogne War Museum, musée dédié à la Seconde Guerre mondiale et particulièrement à la bataille d'Ardennes, donc la dernière grande offensive allemande sur le front ouest de la Seconde Guerre mondiale. Et donc c'est un musée qui raconte ce qui est passé ici à Bastogne et particulièrement plus largement dans la région aux alentours. L'importance de ce site, c'est qu'au sein de la libération de l'Europe, la campagne d'Ardennes a véritablement été une grande surprise à la fin de la guerre pour les armées alliées, puisque c'est le dernier sursaut des armées hitlériennes. Cette bataille d'Ardennes a été une des grandes dernières batailles sur le front de l'Ouest. Les conditions hivernales, naturellement, ont été très importantes ici et très compliquées pour les combattants des différents camps qui se sont battus ici dans la région. Et Bastogne représente donc véritablement cette symbolique de la bataille. C'est en quelque sorte la capitale mémorielle de la bataille d'Ardennes. Le message que nous voulons apporter pour le futur, bien évidemment, c'est de ne jamais oublier ce qui s'est passé ici et que les événements historiques que nous présentons ici au Bastogne War Museum et plus largement dans notre région ici en Ardennes, ces événements historiques puissent servir de leçon, puissent être étudiés par les générations futures pour mieux connaître son passé et mieux envisager justement les années à venir. Le monument qui se trouve derrière moi, c'est le fameux monument du Mardasson qui a été érigé et inauguré en 1950, donc 5 ans après la fin de la Seconde Guerre mondiale. Et c'est un monument qui justement commémore les armées américaines qui se sont battues ici en Ardennes pour stopper cette dernière grande offensive allemande. Monument donc très symbolique qui très prochainement va être repris notamment sous l'égide de l'American Battle Commission Monuments pour valoriser davantage ce site qui est tout à fait symbolique pour nos amis américains.
So thank you, Mathieu Billa from the Bastogne War Museum in the Belgian and Luxembourg Ardennes. So our next stop during our virtual journey along the Liberation Route Europe brings us across the border from Belgium to Germany to the region of Ruhr-Eifel, to the Hürtgen Forest, where one of the longest battles on German soil took place in the Hürtgen Forest.
En tant que parents, nous avons le devoir d'enseigner le passé à nos enfants. La randonnée dans la forêt de Hürtgenwald nous permet d'explorer l'histoire de ces terres. Ce passé, combiné à une nature intacte, en fait une excursion en famille idéale. La route de la libération de l'Europe nous a conduits sur le sentier de la Cale. Nous suivons un magnifique chemin à travers les bois. Pas à pas, vous découvrez les histoires que cet endroit a à raconter. En septembre 1944, les forces alliées sont arrivées dans la forêt de Hürtgen. Elles devaient sentir que la fin de la guerre était proche. Pendant 5 mois éreintants, les soldats américains et allemands se sont affrontés dans cette forêt. Ce fut la plus longue bataille sur le territoire allemand. Au mémorial du soldat Robert Cao, nous prenons un moment. Il est difficile de penser que cette belle forêt a été le théâtre d'une bataille aussi terrible. Les bunkers et les cimetières le long de nos pas nous évoquent le souvenir des soldats tombés au combat, qui étaient souvent à peine plus âgés que nos enfants. Cela fait réfléchir.
So when you see the images of the Hürtgen Forest, it's remarkable to imagine how such a peaceful forest landscape could be the location for such intense fighting at the time. However, we're continuing our journey, and so from the Hürtgen Forest from Germany, we enter the Netherlands to visit the region of Operation Market Garden, one of the largest airborne operations in history. So, I think we have a look at the video telling us a little bit more, giving us some more insights about this very important operation.
We like visiting new cities, exploring parts of Europe we never thought we'd see. The Netherlands, by example, has great stories to tell. One of them is the impressive story of Operation Market Garden. On the 17th September 1944, the Allied forces dropped 3 airborne divisions in German-occupied Netherlands. The operation was a bold attempt to seize the key bridges over the numerous rivers and canals. The first drop was near Eindhoven. After a heroic battle, the Allies took the bridge over the Maas. The main objective of the second airdrop that day: seize the bridge over the River Waal and liberate Nijmegen. Against all odds, they succeed. Last drop was in Eid. They wanted to capture the iconic road and rail bridge across the Rhine River at Arnhem, the last piece of the puzzle. Unfortunately, this was the bridge too far. The German forces stopped the Allies and forced them to retreat. You don't expect to feel the war as vividly here as in other parts of Europe. But when you look closer, it reveals a rich past. We strolled through the countryside along the Rhine, thinking about how it shaped our history.
Jurjan, before we talked to several directors of museums who were also the initiators of the project, we wanted to share the message of an important supporter. It's a foundation in the Netherlands called the Weefonds, and this foundation is supporting us, is supporting the Liberation Route for now about 10 years. And the director of this foundation wanted to address a few words. She's not able to be with us today, but she had a message for all of us.
Weefond is the National Fund for Peace, Freedom and Veteran Care. And we try to engage all kinds of generations to contribute to a peaceful society. And we do that by learning lessons from war and conflict. And of course, the Second World War is for the Netherlands and for many other countries an important benchmark, an important marking point in history. The hiking trail Europe and hiking trail in the Netherlands is very important because it connects all historic sites, it connects all stories, it connects the route of the liberators, and by that connection it will be possible for many more people to visit all those places and to see the connection between also all these places. And we hope that people will do that and will learn from what happened then in the Second World War. As time passes, there are less and less people who've experienced the Second World War themselves. But that doesn't mean that the lessons are becoming less important. We still have to see the Second World War as a marking point, as a benchmark to think about subjects like racism, good and wrong, about tolerance, but also about how the world is created in which we live today since the Second World War. That we live in a democratic system with our democratic values, and that we live in a working together with the European countries in the European Union. That all comes forth of that Second World War. And I hope that people who will do the hiking trail will understand both about the Second World War, but will also understand about what we can learn from the Second World War for now.
Well, Remy, that were very kind words of Lisette Matin. And what I always thought very special is it's a Dutch national fund. However, they've been engaged in our organization for 10 years, as you rightfully said so, in a European project. So they also realized, and still realize, that the war in the Netherlands is not for the Netherlands alone. It belongs to a bigger story. So we have always been very happy with that attitude and their commitment, sort of say.
Yeah, you're right, absolutely, and they have set the tune, I would say, for the others and for the other countries, showing that with an international cooperation, with their support, and later on with the support of the European Union, and later on with the support of the German federal government, that we can all work together for many countries to make this project possible. So we are very thankful indeed for their initial support.
So, thank you, Vefons, Lisette Matar. By the way, 2 weeks ago I had the opportunity to visit the 3 museums in the Netherlands in the region of Arnhem, Nijmegen and Eindhoven, Operation Market Garden. They were the co-initiators of the project in 2008. So it was so nice to, well, so good to hear the excitement of the 3 museum directors about their enthusiasm about linking their museums to the hiking trails, linking the stories of their museums to the rest of Europe, linking the story of Operation Market Garden to a European network. So I suggest we have a look and see what the 3 co-initiators of this project have to say to us today.
I felt like that we could do so much more, create more leverage in getting our message across in working together. And that's when the Liberation Route stepped in. And I think nowadays the Liberation Route is a lifeline for our kind of museums. 1944, right after Operation Market Garden, a lot of troops were in this area, both British, American and German troops, and they were fighting with each other for about 3 weeks. Pretty much the whole place of Overloon and the nearby city of Venray was devastated, people were gone. And when the people returned, they felt like we have to remember this forever. And that's when they started this museum already in 1945. It opened up in 1946. And therefore it's the oldest, pretty much the oldest World War II museum in the whole of Europe. Our message is that war belongs in a museum. And outside the museum, it's up to you as a visitor, as just people, to guard your own freedom and the freedom of others. That's your assignment, not ours.
In that time, 60 years after the Second World War, as a director and as a historian, I was convinced about the fact that there is only one way to understand the Second World War, and it is to think cross-border, to research cross-border, to present cross-border. I saw the advantages by cooperating together with the British, the Germans, the Polish historians in that time in the Liberation Route Europe. And we did it. We really saw and we experienced that most of our partners in Europe told their story, their own suffering, their own heroic stories. They didn't cross the border as we didn't. But in the Liberation Route Europe, we had those discussions, we had those research, and we could present this history cross-border with the multi-perspective approach. And it was huge. It was an example, really, for us to build a new museum here in Groesbeek. So this Freedom Museum, in that time the Liberation Museum, was built on the spot, historical spot of Market Garden and the Rheinland-de-Salt, the Rhine Offensive. Just in the middle of those battlefields, the museum is situated. So it's a lieu de mémoire about 2 of the most important military operations at the end of the Second World War. So the airbornes, they landed here in Groesbeek, and from here the takeoff took place of the Rheinland-de-Salt on the 8th of February 1945. So it's an historical spot. It was the final push, this area delivered the final push to Berlin. So that's absolutely important.
We were co-authors of the project plans, and it's very natural for us to be part of this because we also have this sense of place in what we do. We are located at a historical part of what happened in 1944. We've renovated the villa and refurbished the museum last year. Then, of course, we got struck by COVID, but if you want to see a state-of-the-art, a modern museum about this historical episode, you should come to this historical place where General Urquhart was himself in September 1944. and that was the center of the Battle of Arnhem. So if you want to know more about the Battle of Arnhem as part of Operation Market Garden, this really is the place to be.
Well, Jurjan, now we have to take the last step and to get into Berlin.
Right.
The end of this Liberation Route Europe trails. That takes us into the very heart of Europe, I would say, the European history in this country and in this city of Berlin. So we have a video to show also the importance of this place for the Liberation Route Europe as the end point.
Als Kriegskind habe ich die vielen Gesichter Berlins erlebt. Es ist wichtig, unseren Enkeln zu erzählen, was hier geschah. Denn nur wenn wir die Geschichte kennen, können wir verhindern, dass sie sich wiederholt. Auch hier in Berlin hinterließ der Krieg seine Spuren. Jeder Häuserblock wurde von der Geschichte geprägt und verändert. Diese Orte und Denkmäler erinnern an die Vergangenheit, erinnern an die Schicksale derer, die hier verweilten. Es ist von Bedeutung, den Opfern zu gedenken und den Entbehrungen, die erbracht wurden, um den Krieg zu beenden. Hier im Deutsch-Russischen Museum wurde die bedingungslose Kapitulation unterzeichnet. Berlin, das nun unter den 4 alliierten Mächten aufgeteilt war, wurde zum Symbol eines neuen Deutschlands. Die Geschichte des Krieges und dessen Folgen kann man an den unterschiedlichsten Orten in Berlin entdecken. Im Alliiertenmuseum erfährt man, wie aus einstigen Feinden Deutschland und den Alliierten Freunde wurden. Berlin ist ein Ort, in dem Vergangenheit auf Zukunft trifft. Und ich genieße es, durch die Straßen zu wandern und von meinen Erinnerungen und Erlebnissen zu erzählen.
So this video brought us back to Berlin, where we are here today, and therefore, about Berlin, I would now like to invite Dr. Jürgen Lilteicher from the Allied Museum here in Berlin to the stage to discuss how the war in the immediate post-war period are remembered today in Berlin. Jürgen Lilteicher.
Yeah, hello again. We reached our final destination, Berlin, and as you have been to Karlshorst this morning, as it was mentioned in the video, you're experiencing actually a divided memory. I mean, it's as a result of the Cold War and the divided city. So in Karlshorst, you have a museum which focuses on the German battle, the German, let's say, genocidal war towards the east, and of course the capitulation. And here in Dahlem, founded in 1994, we focus on the story right after 45. Actually, the idea to have this museum came about when Germany had a contract of friendship to the Soviet Union, where they sort of said, well, yes, we're in charge of all the war memorials the Soviet left. So it's actually, if you look in the face of Berlin, the presence of the Soviets is not forgotten, as Mr. Gergen said, it's actually uniquely present everywhere. So when you look at the unified Berlin, it's actually a story of we had a dictatorship of the Nazis, and then we had a dictatorship of the GDR. And what actually happened in this little island, Berlin, within the heart of communism, is almost a forgotten story. And this is the story we like to tell here, like how enemies became friends, as it was mentioned in the video, how international cooperation and solidarity shown through the example of the airlift brought freedom, but also friendship and relation, and also a lesson that international cooperation, transnational structures like the European Union, like this project, for example, only can bring understanding to all the countries and prevent probably for the worst to come. So as we are merely on the margins of the city, we really would like to come back into the city center, and we actually want to go back to our roots where this museum actually was to be situated right in the beginning, so that is the airport of Tempelhof. Tempelhof as the symbol for freedom, as the symbol for the airlift. We really would like to go there. So, but it's still our task, although it's divided. The challenge is, how do we create a common history now between East and West, with different histories, with different background? And it's a constant battle, and it's a constant contested memory, I would say. Even when it comes to term, we talk about the liberation route here. In Germany, the term liberation popped up in 1985 when our President Weizsäcker had this crucial speech, talked that Germany was liberated. Before, it was always considered as being defeated. So it's a term which is pretty new, let's say, for West Germany, and for East Germany, liberation came in 1990. So after the Nazi dictatorship, you had the communist dictatorship. So talking about liberation is already a debate in this country. So, and to create a common history will be our task, of course, together with Karl Zorst and all the different situations when we talk about the areas. Of course, you have the commemoration, the concentration camps, the historical sites here in Berlin, which of course should become a part of this liberation route in future, because liberation, of course, has a very crucial meaning at these sites. So, yeah, so no doubt we are part of the liberation route. We are part of a, let's say, new definition, but still that doesn't refrain us from us to discuss between East and West. You talk about the Russian Federation, what about the path through there? It is a strong and hard debate, and not sometimes probably not a liberal debate. It's even for historians, but I hope we can create a common perspective for the future. So thank you.
Jürgen Liltaker, thank you for your remarks. So talking about Berlin, this morning, Remy, we had this opportunity to accompany our esteemed guest, our American World War II veterans, our friends who are here today, to go to the German-Russian Museum. We went there, we had this tour, and, well, German-Russian Museum, we also saw this conference hall where the German armed forces signed the unconditional surrender, and thus ending the war in Europe at the time.
Yes, Jurjan, we are very honored to have with us 6 US veterans. Today we have presented our work to you, and I think with this, I hope you understand that we are taking a pledge to you, that whatever happens, we are there with our partners across Europe to keep your stories alive. And that is something that comes from our heart to you, that we will never forget what you did. We'll never forget this history. And we're going to make sure that in the years to come, for many, many years, this liberation route, Europe will be there to tell all your stories. So that's important to us to tell you that today, because this is the meaning of this event in the end. We had the chance in the past few days to talk to you, to hear your stories, and also to hear your messages. And we have recorded a small video and a montage of your words, which we would like to share with our audience out there. Thank you again for being with us.
Well, being a German, Jewish, American soldier, after World War II, after VE Day, I had no intention of visiting Germany. I lost my aunt and my uncle and 2 of my cousins, and I just had no interest. But about 25 years later, I was asked to give a lecture in my field, which is college and university food service. That's my specialty, and I got to be known in it because I wrote some books on the subject, and I lectured in Germany. And one of my colleagues who had a big job at the University of Erlangen said, "Oh, you got to come and see my operation," and I did, and I loved it, and he loved mine, and he visited me, and I visited him, and we've been friends for 25 or 30 years, and that's how come I got into Germany. So it's not the first time I've been in Berlin, but it's about the 3rd time. And I was glad to see the house that my father built, that I lived in, and I was glad to be back in Berlin. But mostly I'm glad to be part of this wonderful group of veterans. I feel comfortable with them, and I appreciate having been invited to come. it just makes me feel so wonderful to be back here and knowing what it looked like back then and see what it is now, you know. I'll tell you what, it's just a great thing to see how they've really come back from that, because that was terrible, you know, back then. And I really give them credit for staying faithful to people and the peace of the country and stuff, and doing what they can to keep it that way. So
I'm delighted. First of all, it's a great group, great organization. The people are so kind and so solicitous, and they've done a great job of planning the trip. So we've been comfortable and luxurious, and I'm going to be spoiled rotten by the time I get home. But my wife will correct that situation in about 10 minutes. During the war, we fought up to the Elbe River, and we were instructed to hold up. And I was delighted, because I knew what would happen to us if we had to take Berlin. So that was the end of the fighting for us, for the entire American army, actually. So that's as far as we got, and it took me 76 more years to get back, to get to Berlin. I have no messages. I hope they learn the lessons that I was referring to earlier. I hope they learn the truth and stick with it. Don't embellish it, don't diminish it. Just get the truth, factual. You have in Holland a cemetery, Margrethen, and that's where our guys are buried. I would like to think that, you know, sometime down the line, these future generations will visit places like that.
I want them to have some empathy for other people. I want them to do good things. I happen to, in my hometown, I happen to be involved in our soup kitchen. I designed a soup kitchen that now feeds over 1,000 people, and the kitchen has been named after me because I believe in that. I've been involved in that for 35 years. I think my kids and my grandkids should do the same thing. You have to live in such a way that you feel that on balance, no matter how many things were bad, more things are good on the scale at the end of your life. At 97, at this particular point, I hope, based on what I'm told, maybe other people are telling me that they're more good than bad is in my life, and I want my kids to have that kind of a life. I'm here, and I think it's wonderful that we can be together, and I love you. I don't care who you are, where you come from, what color you are, or anything. I love you, and that's what the world should be. That's what's missing.
Well, yeah. Taking care of the ones that took care of us. Now that's the motto of the Best Defense Foundation, and I think this is the right moment to say a big thank you to the Best Defense Foundation to cooperate with us to bring the veterans here across the Atlantic. We are ever so grateful for that. So thank you, Best Defense Foundation. Thank you. And that brings me back to Remy because, well, to reflect on what we've just seen, Remy. What do you think?
We're getting to the end of this event, and that was so lovely to hear your words and the positivity of your words. This is the beginning. This is the presentation to all of you today and those online who are following us. But this is not the end of the journey. We have presented this trail from London to Berlin, but many other stories need to be told. We talked about Eastern Europe, of course, but we're also going to work very hard in other countries like Italy, for example, and try to bring all those stories together and that people can experience our history in Europe. We have a plan for the next 4 years until the 80th anniversary of the end of the war, which you can see on the screen. But again, in 24, 25, that will not be the end of the journey. There is so much work for us, and I hope everyone can see we're very young, and we have time ahead of us to actually complete this Liberation Route Europe.
Thank you, Remy. Thank you for the wrap-up, I would say, of the project. We come to the last part of our program, and the Ellery Foundation is very happy to have its chairman here today, Ed Kronenberg, who flew over from the Netherlands to Berlin, the chairman of the Ellery Foundation, for our closing remarks. Hello, Ed. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, what more can be said after this moving session and moving introduction? First of all, Jürgen, director, partner, thank you very much for hosting this important event this afternoon. Thank you for your presentation, both of you, and for the whole team, for the great work you've undertook over the past years, but also the past couple of weeks, in order to prepare for all this. But of course, I'd like to say, first of all, a great thank you, to you, Guy, to you, Bill, to you, Jack, to you, Robert, to you, Melvin, and to you, Paul. Thank you for being here today and sharing this moment, this very important moment, with us. And thank you, yes, Best Defense Foundation, for making this possible. We are very grateful and indebted to you for this precious moment. And dear veterans, your presence here is an historic moment in itself. I mean, the fact that you are here today in this historic setting, in this great city of Berlin, at the crossroads of history, European history, and global world history. And it's also a very exceptional moment here today. Exceptional to be in your presence, to share your stories, and to listen to you. And it's very much in vogue these days to go into space. But for me today it was an equally fascinating experience to go back in history and to listen to what happened. Although we do know a lot about our history, even last night when we had dinner and today when we started our trip at the German-Russian Museum and now here in the Allied Museum, we've learned new facts about what was going on over the past decades during the Second World War. And to hear your stories of courage, of commitment, of perseverance, and also about humanity, it was quite something for us. And it's a day I think we will never, never forget. And even your great sense of humor, which to me shows that how difficult it may be, you've been able to come to terms somehow with the darkest hours of mankind you've been going through with your brothers in arms. And that in itself, I must say, is very, very impressive. And your commitment to come to Europe again, to take the trip, to fly from Washington to Frankfurt and then on to Berlin, and to be part of this program. And I think you said so already, Jurjen, but we couldn't have had a better VIP support, a better start of this important day also for the Liberation Youth Europe Foundation, starting our international hiking trails, to connect the dots between London and Berlin, to connect the cities, to connect the regions, and to connect, first and foremost, the people, to share our stories, to tell each other what happened. And I think that's the real importance of today. And we owe it to you. We owe it to you because what you have done, and to all your brothers in arms, as I said, who've been part of that huge effort that took place a long time ago. And we have to continue to tell the stories you told us. We have to inspire the younger generations so that they realize what happened. I think that is key to the work we are undertaking together. And to teach them the values of freedom, democracy, and equality, and the need to defend these values everywhere, every time, and to live also by these values. I'd like to end my words by using a comment which I read on the book you wrote, Guy. But it applies to all your memories. And the comment on the book, but it's also a comment on what we went through over the past 2 days. States, and I refer to your stories, your memories, they provide hope, strength, and graciousness in times of uncertainty. And I think that's what it is, because times are uncertain. And we should be very well aware of what's going on around us in Europe, in the world right now. I think democracy is at stake, and it's not a given. And it was also said by the Director General, we have to fight for it on a daily basis. And thank you so much for your inspiring presence, the inspiring introduction of Liberation Europe, starting the international hiking trails. It was a great day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ed Kronenberg, Chairman of the Ellery Foundation. Thank you. So, yeah, very nice closing remarks indeed. This brings us to the end of this part of our program. However, Amy, I was told that there's some finger food and drinks, and we can relax together with our guests from the United States. So shall we take the lead and show them where all these refreshments are being displayed?
Absolutely, we have to apologize for those behind their screens that might be hungry. We're not going to get it, but we're very happy about this event. We really want to thank you all. And indeed, before going there, I would like to thank all of you being here today, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for being with us today and supporting our project from the beginning, and the Best Defense Foundation for your work and your support. As I said to you yesterday, we are a sort of brotherhood of all those organizations keeping this history alive and making sure that in the future the younger generations know about their stories. So thank you so much for being there. And last but not least, thank you, Jürgen, for your very warm welcome in this Allied Museum. It's been a pleasure to be here in Berlin and especially in your museum. So thank you so much. And I guess, Jürgen, we follow you
to that way. Are you coming with us?
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.